If there was one thing that I feel would serve most parents in their journey of parenting, it is the path towards forgiveness. And that is why I bring to you my dear, amazing friend, Azim Khamisa, who has one of the most heralding stories of forgiveness that really we can imagine or that we've even ever heard. And what he has done to transform his pain into tragedy is something that mightily has blessed anyone who's listened to him and can bless you too. So this is a beautiful conversation that will only bless and enhance you. Put your AirPods in, grab some popcorn, whatever it is, to give your time and attention to this hour and a half conversation that will surely, surely, surely bless your life and bless how you choose to show up in the world. Enjoy, and I'll see you on the inside. Hello, everyone. You're about to meet a man whose life embodies one of the most profound human alchemies imaginable. A man who turned unimaginable pain into a global mission of peace, compassion, and forgiveness. I first met Azim Khamisa nearly 20 years ago when I interviewed him for the documentary film, The Truth, The Journey Within. Even then, I was totally blown away. His story gripped me, not because it was tragic, but because of the way he walked through that tragedy. After losing his only son, Tariq, to a senseless act of violence, Azim found himself standing at a crossroads. And instead of choosing bitterness, revenge, and despair, which we've all would find understandable, he chose the path of the unthinkable, and that was forgiveness. And it didn't stop there. The moment that he chose forgiveness was a moment of radical grace that became his launching pad. Azim went on to found the Tariq Khamisa Foundation, igniting a forgiveness movement that's touched the hearts of millions across the globe. He's not just a speaker, though he's given over 700 keynotes and more than 1,000 presentations to students. He's not just an author, though he's penned 5 powerful books and has one in the wings. He is truly an emissary of peace, a bridge between worlds, a man who's taken his deepest wound and turned it into a wellspring of healing for the world. Azim has received over 80 national and international awards, has been featured across major media platforms, and his TED Talk has been viewed over 1 million times. And yet, despite all of that, he remains so grounded, so deeply loving, and just a joy to share a meal with or a glass of wine, which we have done several times. Today, Azim continues to lead a growing team with a bold and beautiful dream, which is to inspire world peace through the practice of forgiveness. And if anyone on earth is qualified to show us how, it's him. It is my absolute honor to welcome to the conversation my dear friend, a man who teaches us that even in the most shattered places, love and peace can still rise. Welcome to the show, Azim Khamisa. What's wrong with my tongue today? I did that twice. Azim Khamisa. Hello, friend.
Hi there. Thank you, Brittany. Great to see you.
So great to see you.
And we go back a long ways. And thank you for all the great work you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah, you and I have had some dinners in New York, some dinners in California. You were around when my babies were coming into the world, and I would sneak away to see you for a few hours. So it's a treasure to have you in this experience with me. Thank you for saying yes.
Likewise, Brittany. It's wonderful to see you.
Thank you so much, friend. The reason I called you to ask you if you would speak on this Happy Parent, Happy Child Summit is because so much of what I see with parenting is founded in how we were parented. It's the wounds that are created during our childhood. And I say that parents are either running to their childhood or from their childhood in their parenting experience, in some variation in there. One of the things that is such a gateway to freedom for parents in their discovery of how to be in the fullness of parenting is how they put attachment to their story of their past. And that's where you come in. Your journey towards forgiveness started with the, as I said, the senseless act of Tariq's murder. And who you became as a result of that is just so exceptional. Will you please share with our listeners first what happened, and I love when you get to that crossroads moment and we can really speak to that.
Sure. The tragedy is 30 years old. Tariq was a old soul in a young body. He was a student at San Diego State University, a gifted writer and a brilliant photographer, and inspired someday to work for National Geographic. And he worked on weekends as a pizza delivery man. And he was lured to a bogus address by a youth gang, which is close to where he lived and close to San Diego State University. It's a middle-class area. The restaurant he worked for was a family-owned restaurant, and they routinely delivered pizzas to that particular neighborhood. And he was his turn to deliver the pizzas, and he got to the site. It was an apartment building. They gave the right address of the apartment building, but the wrong apartment number. So he knocked on many doors, trying to find out who'd ordered the pizzas. Of course, nobody had. He came back to his car, put the pizzas in the trunk of his car, climbed into the driver's side seat. And as he was about to leave the scene of the crime, he was accosted by 4 youth gang members. 3 of them were 14-year-old. The leader of the gang was an 18-year-old that gave the order to a 14-year-old, bust him bones. And he fired 1 round that came through the driver's side window, entered my son's body under the left shoulder blade. It traveled across the upper part of his chest, and it actually exited from his right armpit. And as the coroner explained to me afterward, he says the bullet followed a perfect path. And I thought, a perfect path, I queried. He says, Mr. Khamisa, I'm not trying to be insensitive. We do not see a path like this very often. And what it means in my lingo is it destroyed all the vital organs in Tariq's body. And he died a couple of minutes later, drowning in his own blood over a lousy pizza at the age of 20. So needless to say, you're a parent too, Brittany, that there's nothing more complicated than to lose a child. It never, ever goes away. 30 years, it's never a day I don't still think of him several times during the day, as parents do about children. And I'm glad you're doing this summit because it is critical. And I worked in international finance. I was born in Kenya, and I left Kenya 50 years ago because we were a minority and targeted, thinking my children would be safer here. So it's ironic that Tariq was actually shot and killed on a street of a city I picked for us to move to. And prior to him passing away, I was educated in England. My education was in mathematics and finance. I worked in international finance, had a good life, traveled the world and stayed in nice places. And then I had no life. I remember it took literally all of my willpower just to climb out of bed. I did not know where all that energy had gone. I mean, routinely I flew in from London, changed, suitcases and flew to Tokyo. And now it was very difficult to figure out I would live the rest of my life and why I would live the rest of my life. But I've survived the tragedy, and sometimes in deep trauma, there is a spark of clarity. Every saint has suffered the dark night of the soul. And obviously, that was the darkest night of my soul. And I grew up in the Sufi tradition, which is the metaphysical interpretation of Islam. My mom was very spiritual. My dad was a businessman. So I grew up with equal emphasis on my career and my spiritual life. And I started to meditate when I was 20 years old. I met one of the cronies of my mom who taught me how to meditate. And thank God, because in my deepest crisis, my degrees in math and finance, although I went to some pretty good schools, were useless. What really saved me was a spiritual foundation. I lost Tariq in my early 40s. And I had this out-of-body experience because when I got the call from homicide to tell me that Tariq had been shot and killed, my knee-jerk reaction was, no. That didn't make sense. He was a good kid. No. I always thought it was a mistaken identity, which does happen. I live in San Diego, and I almost convinced that it couldn't have been Tariq. So I quickly called his home. Back then, you didn't have cell phones, and fully expecting him to pick up the phone. Of course, he didn't. Jennifer did. Jennifer was his fiancée. They had been dating for over 2.5 years and had recently moved in together, had plans to get married and build their life together. They were both the same age, and they were both students at San Diego State University. Of course, she picked up the phone. She couldn't say anything. Because she already knew, because homicide had gone to their home first. And then it hit. She was a sobbing. And I still remember I lost strength in both of my legs as I collapsed to the floor. I was in my kitchen. I hit my head against the refrigerator. I curled up in a ball. I don't have the words to describe to you how excruciatingly painful that experience was. I never felt pain like that. I don't know what's more devastating for a parent to hear that the child dies before they do. And the pain was so excruciating, I had what I call an out-of-body experience. And I left my body. I believe in God. And I believe I went into the loving embrace of God. I don't remember how long I was gone for. But when the explosion subsided, God sent me back into my body with the wisdom that there are victims at both ends of the gun. I didn't quite get the significance of that message immediately, but not so long after that. I made some very difficult calls to his mother. She lived in Seattle. I live in San Diego. Called my parents. It's a difficult time for my family because my father had just gone through a 12-hour operation when they did 7 bypasses. So couldn't tell him. He was still in the hospital. And then I called my best friend, and he said, and I live by myself. He said, I'll be right over. When he came with his wife. And his wife went to get Jennifer because she was by herself. Her parents, her father was a dentist in the Navy and lived in Hawaii at that time. And I was alone with my best friend. By this time, we had a visit from homicide, and there were some eyewitnesses. And my buddy said to me, he said, whoever these kids are that did this to Tariq, I pray they will fry in hell. And I looked at him and I said, I don't feel that way. I see that there are victims at both ends of the gun. It's the download that I got earlier after I found out. And I never really went there. The kid who killed him was 14 years old. Obviously, I had compassion for Tariq. Somehow in my heart, I felt compassion for the 14-year-old. I did not see him as the enemy. I saw the societal peer pressure that forced many young men and women to fall through the crack. And then they choose lives of gangs and crime and drugs and alcohol and weapons at a young age. He actually joined the gang at 11. I think, my God, you should be playing with toys and not guns. So I didn't know much about youth gangs at that time. Of course, I'm an expert right now. And the early days were very difficult. And I thank God that I had support of my family and my mosque and my congregation, and we have a ritual where we have prayers on obviously at the funeral 10 days, 20 days, 30 days, but the most significant prayers are on the 40 days, and we buried Tariq in Vancouver, Canada, where my parents lived, because my father couldn't have traveled since he had that operation. And my spiritual advisor on the 40th day said, this is a very significant milestone in our tradition, because for the first 40 days, you are supposed to grieve. And the reason you're supposed to grieve, because the soul and the spirit of your son is in close proximity of loved ones and family. But 40 days, it ends the grieving period. And during these 40 days, I had a tremendous amount of support from my community. They brought, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You're not supposed to cook or clean house. People will come and help you out. You're just supposed to grieve. And that was a pretty powerful ritual. And I don't think I could have gone through the early days without rituals. And that's my book that I'm working on about rituals. And what he said to me on the 40th day, after we had prayers at the mosque, he says, I know 40 days is not a long enough time to stop grieving, but that's our tradition, because at the end of 40 days, the soul moves to a different consciousness, because we believe we have a forward journey after we die. And he says, excessive grieving by family and friends will impede Tariq's journey in the next world. My recommendation to you is to do a good, compassionate deed in his name, because good, compassionate deeds are spiritual currency and will provide high-octane fuel for Tariq in the next world. And that stayed with me. Tariq died in January. and April. I spent a week in Mammoth, silent retreat kind of thing. A good friend of mine has a condo there. He gave me the key, so go anytime you want. And I walked every day in the beautiful Mammoth, but mostly ate it. The first night I ate out, but the rest of the time I ate at home, journaled, meditated, read. And but this kind of message played in my head like a broken record that instead of grieving, do good, compassionate deeds in Tariq's name, because that would provide spiritual currency for him in the next world. And obviously, as a parent, you want to do something for your children. And you're thinking, how do you do something for your child who's no longer here? But that kind of made sense to me. So I came down from the mountain, so as to speak, stronger than I had gone up. And I decided that what if I became the enemy, not of the kid who killed my son, but of the societal peer pressure that forced so many young people to fall to the crack and then choose lives of crime and drugs and alcohol and weapons. And I approached my best friend who was with me soon after Tariq died, and another friend of mine who was a lawyer, and started and founded the Tariq Khamisa Foundation 9 months after Tariq died. So I started the foundation in October with the mission of stopping kids from killing kids by breaking the cycle of youth violence. And essentially, we had 3 mandates. First and foremost was to save lives of children. And it will shock you, we lose a child to gun violence every waking hour of our day in the richest nation in the world.
Astonishing.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So our first mandate was to save lives of children. Our second mandate was to empower them with the right choices so they don't fall to the crack and get involved with crime and drugs and gangs and alcohol and weapons. Our third mandate was to achieve the principle of nonviolence, of accountability, of empathy, of compassion, of forgiveness, and of peace building. And I started with a very simple premise that violence is a learned behavior. No child is born violent. Tony, who took Tariq's life, was not born violent. But if you accept as a truism that violence is a learned behavior, it follows that nonviolence can also be a learned behavior. But you have to teach it. Now think about it. Where do our kids learn nonviolence in our society? If it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah, right. Nowhere.
Nowhere. Movies, video games, here's another surprising statistic. By the time our kids get to grade 1, which are 6 years old, they've seen over 100,000 images of violence.
Wow. Wow.
So soon after I formed the foundation, I reached out to Tony's grandfather and guardian. And we met in the public defender's office, which is who defended Tony. And his name is Ples Felix. And I started the conversation by telling Ples, I'm not here seeking retribution or revenge because your grandson killed my son. Rather, I'm here in the spirit of compassion and forgiveness, because what I really see here is we both lost a son. Tony lived with his grandfather and calls him daddy. I can't bring Tariq back from the dead. He's gone. There's nothing you can do to get Tony out of the criminal justice system. He was the first 14-year-old in the state of California to be tried as an adult.
Mhm.
They dropped the age from 16 to 14, and now they've lifted it back up to 16, thank God. And there's nothing you can do to get Tony out of the criminal justice system. But one thing you and I can do is to make sure other young people like Tariq and Tony don't end up dead or end up in prison, that we can do. And it behooves us to work together because it was your grandson that took the life of my son. The real reason I'm here is to ask for your help because this is a big job to stop kids from killing kids. I can't do it by myself. Will you help me? He was very quick to take my hand of forgiveness. 30 years later, we're still together. He's as close to me as my own brother. He's probably one of the wisest person I know. Has a degree in urban development, worked as a manager for the city of San Diego, and had a good home for his grandson. 5 years later, I went to see Tony because I knew for me to complete my journey of forgiveness, Brittany, that at some point I had to come eyeball to eyeball with Tony. It took a couple thousand hours of meditation because that's very hard to do for us mortals. Anyway, so I asked Les to go with me, but I said, you know, I really need a long time with Tony. I have some tough questions. He was the last person to see my son. So if you are there, he's going to be defensive because you are his grandfather. The place was very gracious. We started together for the first half an hour. And then he left us alone. And then I talked to Tony man to man. He was 19 years old. And yes, I asked him all the questions. He answered them. But the seminal moment in that interview, which I still remember, he's 43 now, was we locked eyeballs. I'm looking in his eyes to try and find a murderer, and I didn't. I was able to climb through his eyes and touch his humanity, that I got the spark in him. He's no different than the spark in you or whoever is listening to this interview. I wasn't expecting that. He was polite. He was remorseful. He was well-mannered. And he was articulate. And he did not portray any of the typical attitudes of a 19-year-old in our society, especially a 19-year-old gangman. I wasn't expecting him. What I'm trying to tell you, he was a likable kid. So I told him, you know, Tony, I have forgiven you because I've been working with your grandfather for the last over 4 years. And I want you to know that when you come out of prison, we have a job waiting for you at the Tariq Khamisa Foundation. And you can come and work with your grandfather and me. And I remember when, as I left the prison after several hours, it was very freeing. I knew at that point I completed my journey of forgiveness. And it was like a big albatross weight that was lifted from my shoulders. And the preeminent thought in my mind was, why did I wait 5 years? Because forgiveness can be very, very freeing. The next day, the grandfather called me and said, Azim, that meeting you had with Tony has totally shifted him 180 degrees, because prior to you meeting him, he would say, Daddy, I'm not going to make it in prison. I'm going to die in prison. But after you gave him some love and some hope, as you were leaving, he said, Daddy, that's a very strong person. Not only he forgave me for taking his only son, but he's also offered me a job. I'm not worthy of it, but I'm going to try. From the time he was 19, I stayed with him for the next 20 years, advocating for his release. It's complicated, especially for somebody who's committed homicide. We stayed in touch. We wrote pretty much every month. And finally, in 2019, he was in front of the parole board. And I was there, his grandfather was there, my daughter, I have a daughter and three gorgeous grandchildren from her. She was there, she's the executive director of her brother's foundation. And the parole hearing was 8 hours, and they grilled Tony. It's very easy to have issues when you are in prison, altercations, because you can look at a guard the wrong way and you're in trouble. And they grilled Tony through every altercation while he was in prison. He cried, we all cried. It was a very difficult parole hearing, but at the end of the 7 hour, primarily it was the two commissioners interviewing Tony, and then I was given a chance to speak, and my daughter was given a chance to speak. And my attitude was that from the beginning, I saw there were victims at both ends of the gun. I told the commissioner, you know, he's not the same person as he was when he took Tariq's life. He has work to do, not behind bars. Release him because he can come work for the foundation. And think about how many kids he's going to say when he's on stage with me saying that when I was 11, I joined a gang. When I was 14, I killed Mr. Khamisa's only son. I wish I can turn the clock back. So how many? I said, we worked through 4th through 10th grade. Tony joined a gang in 6th grade. And we're working with this population that are on a slippery slope. He can save many kids that are maybe thinking about joining a gang. So release him, we'll hire him, and I'll vouch and guarantee his behavior. And he actually won parole, which never happens. First time you're going through the parole board. So he was released in 2019, had to be in a halfway house, and now he volunteers for the foundation, as his grandfather and I have done for 30 years. And he volunteered for the foundation. We often speak together.
Yeah.
So we've saved him, but you know, more important message here is that he's saving a lot of kids by sharing his testimony. Just tells you what's possible, you know.
Every single time I hear you tell that story, it moves me to tears. And that just shows the potency of the love a parent has for a child. And that is so beyond. And the anguish that, the imagined anguish that I know I am putting myself in your shoes to, just the consumption is just very heart gripping. So I thank you for what you do. I thank you for the story that you tell and retell and retell and retell and retell, not to relive the pain, but to have it be a story of possibility for humanity. And that there is always an opportunity for a blessing, for love and light to come in, and even in the darkest situations.
Absolutely. I could have gone the other way. What good would that have done, you know? I was lucky I was able to transcend something that is so negative and end in a positive place. I always say the Lord works in mysterious ways. It's changed my life. I mean, as you pointed out, my passion is talking to kids, and I've reached a couple of million in this last 30 years. And what gives me hope is that not only are these principles of accountability, empathy, compassion, forgiveness, and peace building teachable, our kids are hungry for them. And I can tell you stories after stories after stories. I have over 150,000 letters from kids that have, after they hear, they totally change their trajectory. I was talking at San Diego State University, and this kid came up to me and said, Mr. Khamisa, you changed my life. And I said, well, tell me more. He said, so I'm at San Diego State University. I know your son was a alma mater here, and I just graduated in a degree of finance, and I have a job at Wells Fargo. because of you. Because when I was in seventh grade, you came and spoke at my school, and I decided to make you my role model because I know you were in finance and not follow my older brother, my father, and my grandfather, who were all gang involved. What's the value of that? You can't buy this stuff.
Yeah.
His kids won't be in a gang, you know? So I mean, we have so many stories like that. You know, I don't know if you, I remember you used to live in California. One of our schools here in La Jolla, I spoke there. It's a private school. It was just before the pandemic. It's very expensive. Most of the kids end up in Ivy League schools. And a young girl came up to me after I spoke there. It's like it's 800 students, 200 faculty, 1-to-4 ratio. And she said the same thing to me. She said, you know, you changed my life. I said, well, tell me more. He says, I was put in the foster care system when I was 8 years old. I met you in seventh grade when I was 13 years old. And I was so moved with your story of forgiveness. I forgave my biological mother for all the pain that she had caused me to put me in the foster care system. I forgave all of my foster parents for the confusion that I put in my life. And as a 13 years old, I applied myself. I won a scholarship to this exclusive school. I just graduated and I have a free ride at UCLA. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, the determination in this young girl was so palpable. It wouldn't surprise me if she's still at UCLA. This happened, you know, in 2019. And it wouldn't surprise me if she transformed the foster care system.
Yeah.
So it's amazing that people that are able to see the benefits of forgiveness can totally shift their lives going forward. And I think that is something that is important to share, especially in the summit you're doing and the work you're doing, because when I wrote my first book, From Murder to Forgiveness, A Father's Journey, there wasn't much on forgiveness. You almost ought to go back to the scriptures. Today, there is at least 500 clinical studies. There's a forgiveness project at Stanford, another one in London, and I met a lot of these organizations that are doing amazing work. That it is clinically proved that forgiveness is healthy, right? If you stay in anger and resentment and hatred, who are you hurting? It's a great quote by Mandela that unforgiveness is like drinking poison and waiting for your enemy to die. Kills you, right? So it improves your health, it improves your relationships, and you're dealing with happy parents, happy children, right?
Well, think
Well,
about it. I mean, if you're carrying that around, it becomes the lens through which you see the world. You know, if
exactly.
you had not chosen the path you chose, you would have a very different lens, potentially very victim filled and anger filled towards what you so, everyone would say, well, you can't blame him. He lost his only son. He lost a child. You can't blame him, this making excuses for, and yet you chose to be a hero in your own storyline and rise above that. And the impact that you create is it is noteworthy, and yet it's so doable for everyone.
Absolutely. And you know, normally when you lose a child, most parents go through a divorce and they move away from the city because the grief is so much that even they lose all their friends because there's nothing the friends can do to help you. I was already divorced, so I have a good relationship with my Tariq's mother. And she's now moved here because she came when my first grandson was born. She grew up in Seattle. She lived in Seattle where Tariq grew up. Uh, so I've not left town. Most of my friends have become better friends because of the way I've reacted. So it's important to say that forgiveness not only improves your health, it creates more loving relationships with your children, your spouse, your friends, your community. And I think this is important in the summit you're doing because there is a lot of issues between parents and children. And as you pointed out, that that many of the parents are living with the lens of what might have happened to them. So forgiveness is a gift that you give yourself. And I think that if I look back and see everything that has manifested in my life as a result of the choice I made 30 years ago, it's way beyond my wildest dreams. Because I think it puts you in the present. Because if you are dealing with anger and resentment or even guilt, because at some level we've all hurt people, right? It doesn't put you in the present. And this stuff gnaws on your consciousness 24/7. But once you forgive, you're not living in the past. So you can put all of your attention on your life's mission. And we all have a mission. We all have a spiritual purpose. And you're doing it right now in what you're in the summit. And I think that I wasn't trained in social services. I've succeeded because I believe that I don't live in the past. I don't live in anger and resentment and guilt and despair. You know, I am able to say that this was my journey. And once you get to so something I learned from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, that every emotion has a frequency. And you said, you know, when you look at judgment, is probably one of the lowest frequencies. One of the biggest impediment to forgiveness is judgment. Greed, avarice, anger, resentment, hatred. He says these are all very low frequencies. Happiness doesn't live there. And then there are some emotions that have a very high frequency, like goodwill, like friendship, like trust, like gratitude, like empathy, like compassion. He says forgiveness is right there with love. Happiness lives there. Now, when you meet somebody like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he's vibrating at those high frequencies 24/7. Most of us mortals have a bad hair day and you fall off the wagon, you know. Happens to me too, by the way. You know, I'm not quite there as His Holiness the Dalai Lama. But one thing I can tell you that having done this work for 30 years, I'm spending more time up here. Not judging, you know, seeing the humanity in people, having a strong sense of empathy and compassion. And it has served me well. So I think that at some level, forgiveness is a selfish act. Actually, I said that in my workshop one time, because you do it for you. One of my students in my workshop corrected me, says, Azim, it's not a selfish act, it is a soulful act. So it's a gift you give to yourself. And I think that it's hard. I know we live in a very much an eye for an eye society, but we tried that for 2,000 plus years. Where has it gotten us, you know? And, you know, when you look at all of the amazing, you know, Lord Jesus Christ, Father, forgive them, they do not know what they are doing. Every spiritual leader, every luminary, you know, when you look at Mandela, you know, look at Desmond Tutu, who I know personally, and you look at Gandhi, and you see that they are able to see that there are victims at both ends of the gun. I mean, that was never said before when I said that. What is clear now, right? Who's the enemy here, right? You know, it's easy to say Tariq was a victim of the 14-year-old, but the 14-year-old is a victim of society, of American society. Well, who is American society? It's you and me. How did we create a culture where kids kill kids? What is my responsibility in that thing? Because societies don't just happenstance, right? We're all architects of the society we live in. So I think that level of empathy and compassion is important to garner. And even when we do the programs in schools, and I know your focus is happy parents, happy children, the hardest part is not to teach the kids. The hardest part is to shift parents and teachers
Right.
because they're very punitive, right?
Right.
And that's not restorative. So we spend time before we even do our programs in school that we work with teachers and change their mind from a punitive mindset to a restorative mindset. And the
Perfect.
same thing we do with parents.
Right.
That, when kids act, it's unresolved grief, But you need to understand that and hurt people, as you probably know this line.
It's one of my most quoted, actually.
Yeah, so the point is yeah, and I think this has been a very important part of my own evolution, Brittany, that I truly learned that your external circumstances are a replica of your innermost crisis. So
I want
we
you to
all,
say that again, please. That's big. That's big.
that's I'm just saying that your external circumstances are a result of your internal disharmony. So the work you have to do is to shift your inner self. When I meditate a couple hours a day, I get all my ahas in my meditation. And even I tell the kids this, that if you have an important decision, don't just rely on your intellect or your heart. Sure, nothing wrong with a strong intellect. The better education you get, the more you are able to look at the pros and cons. Yeah. So if there is an important decision, yeah, go to your head first and say, does it make sense? Does it not make sense? If it does make sense, go to your heart and ask the question, does it feel good, right, and just? Because we all have a sense of what is good, what is right, and what is just. We're born with it. Don't stop there. Go to your spirit and ask, is this inspiring? Will others follow my lead? If I don't get a check in all three boxes, I don't do it because we've all done things with, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. And that really feels good, right, and just. And so why did I do that? So I think this internal, one of my books is The Secret of Bulletproof Spirit. We all have a bulletproof spirit, but we don't necessarily connect with that faculty, which is wiser and smarter and compassionate and always helps you make decisions that are in the highest good for you, the other person, in the universe. So when you fix that internal disharmony, those internal conflicts that you have, and you start to learn to vibrate at this high frequency emotions, it will shift your external circumstances.
Let's just pause on that for a second, because I think that is so vital to the gift that forgiveness offers. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Right.
And when you are able to sit there and I say from a subjective to an objective, I say when you adjust from, you did something to me and I'm going to react because you wronged me. And I adjust from that to, okay, that's coming towards me. It's very fascinating that that person feels compelled to speak to me in that way. What is the opportunity in this moment for my growth?
Right.
How can I take this experience and use it for me to understand myself better and to show up in a way that I know I'm growing in my tools, or I know I have the tools to use. And that's where we begin to experience more of ourselves. Wouldn't you say that when you went through the experience of forgiveness, you discovered more of yourself that you didn't know was there before?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it was so freeing. My preeminent thought was, why did I wait 5 years to meet Tony? I mean, I met his grandfather, but the gift that I got meeting Tony was 100 times more powerful to then really understand that I had now completed my journey of forgiveness. And what you just said is very true. There's a good quote by Henry David Thoreau that says, it's not important what you look at. What's important is what you see.
That's really good.
You know, I
Yeah.
mean, I saw there were victims at both ends of the gun. And that shifted, and that was a gift that came in from a higher power because of my spiritual foundation. But we all have that to develop it. But that led me to not be in judgment, but move eventually to compassion and empathy. Seeing the young man, if I had grown up like him, I might would have made the same decision. He's a pizza delivery man. I had nothing, you know. So, you know, we have to look and see that we are accountable for the society that we've created.
Right.
I mean, when you look at where we are, you know, we are probably more divided as a country than I've ever seen, and I've been here 50 years. And I think that this, we probably need to move from a punitive mindset to a restorative mindset. And it's going to take that. It's going to take the practice of empathy, compassion, forgiveness. You know?
One of the things that you have said many times is that stance of compassion, and it's teaching people that if I walk a mile in your shoes,
Right.
I can better understand that walk. Do you have shoes that with holes in them? Do you have shoes that, you know, fit comfortably? Are they blistering your feet? Metaphorically speaking, of course.
Right.
Can you talk to our listeners about that? The importance of standing in the other person's purview, their vantage point, to grow compassion for how they're, what they may be going through as part of your own gift towards your own healing.
Yeah, absolutely. So the precursor for forgiveness is compassion. The precursor for compassion is empathy. And the precursor for empathy is you really have to know the person. So we do, in our Safe School model, we teach empathy. So this is a good example of empathy. So our theme on teaching empathy is you don't know me till you walk a mile in my shoes, and I don't know you till I walk a mile in your shoes. Because if I walk a mile in your shoes, I get to know you. If you walk a mile in my shoes, you really get to know me. And you can't have empathy for somebody you don't know. So then we say, okay, here's the lesson of how you develop empathy, and your homework is to go walk a mile in somebody's shoes that you don't know. So the next lesson from empathy is we move to compassion. But the teacher asks, who wants to share their homework on empathy? And there's this Hispanic kid, his name is Alejandro, he goes by Alex. The most disruptive kid. You could see a wannabe gang member written all over his face, the way he walked, the way he dressed, signs and the whole 9 yards. He wanted to share his homework. And he was very animated. And the teacher thought, oh my God, he's going to ruin my lesson. So she kind of avoided him, you know, tried to not notice him. But he was so animated, there was no way not to notice him. So finally she said, Alex, what is you want to share? He says, I was walking in the hood last weekend, and this kid gave me a dirty, angry look. And he's Hispanic. The kid giving him a dirty, angry look is African American. And he says the rules of the hood are if a rival gang member gives you a dirty, angry look, you go beat him up. And Alex is bigger than this kid. And this is 7th grade, 13 years old.
Wow.
So he says, because you taught me, you don't know me till you walk a mile in my shoes, and I don't know you till I walk a mile in your shoes. I walked up to this kid and says, why are you giving me a dirty, angry look? What did the kid tell you? He said, I'm not giving you a dirty, angry look. I'm angry because my brother was shot and killed in this spot last night.
Mm.
What you do? He says, I reached out to him. I put my hand on his shoulder and I said, you know, I feel your pain.
Mm.
My favorite uncle was shot in the same spot 6 months ago. Now tell me you can't teach this stuff. And he walks the hood every weekend, not just last weekend. Somebody gives him an angry, dirty look. What does he do? He reaches out. Yeah,
Yeah, that one micro pivot changed everything for him. And he was able to see his experience and that boy's experience so differently. Even as parents, we have this opportunity to speak to our children and to, what are they going through? What's going on in their world right now?
right.
Versus listen to me and why aren't you doing what I'm asking you to do and feeling so frustrated, but really to step into that empathy and seek to understand. And even if, with girls and their identity is so about based on social constructs of social media and being seen as pretty and popular and all of that, that's still a pressure that we have manufactured in their environment and that we've allowed as parents to, have them be in the social media arena. I know I have 3 boys, and their environment is very much that they have to connect through games and technology, and that's how they make their friends. And um, it's it's rough. And as a mom, I think, I get so frustrated that they're spending so much time on it. And so I do seek to have empathy and walking in their shoes, just on the day to day, Azim, not in any major infractions, but just even in the small micro moments of the day. Like, what is going on inside this child?
Absolutely. It's to look at conflict as an opportunity. And the pivot you have to do here is to move away from a punitive mindset to a restorative mindset. And that's the hardest thing to do because we are conditioned, because we grew up in an eye for an eye society. We are very quick to judge based on all the isms. Yet, if you can shift and learn to live more at these high vibrating emotions and look and see that if there is an altercation or a bad behavior, to not be punitive about it and take your cell phone away for 10 days or whatever, is to look and see what's going on. To be in a restorative mindset and say, I understand. It's not your natural behavior. What's going on? You know? And through the lens of empathy and compassion and continue to, as you pointed out, doing it on a daily basis. Because at the end of the day, your children, the way the children learn from you is for you to be a role model. So once you change your internal disharmony and you move from those low vibration to a high vibration, it will change who you are, which will affect your relationships, not only with your kids, your husband, your partner, your community, your friends. And I said, and all of my friends are becoming even more loving and we have a better bond as a result of the way I reacted to this tragedy in my life. And I think that you have to live it. I couldn't be doing this work if I didn't travel the journey I have. But I can see that was the right choice for me. And I think when people see that, it changes the future trajectory and that relationship. Plus, it's good for you, when Fred Luskin is a guy that runs the Stanford Project. He's a partner with us in the work we're trying to bring forgiveness mainstream as a portal to create world peace. And he's been, most of his partners have been in this space like I have been for 3 decades. And he confirms that, that the forgiveness is a healing elixir, right? And that there are many people that live in this anger and hatred. Sure, it's difficult. I'm not saying it's easy, but it is learnable. And once you are able to actually go into that space, it will amaze you what gifts it's going to give to you. I don't judge.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I don't
that's,
judge because I think that we are all created equal in the eyes of the universe. And there's a humanity, and I do work in prisons as well, that even the most hardened criminals have something of value buried deep within them. Difficult to find sometimes. Like I said, like mining precious stones are deep and they are hard to find. You have to bring the dross up and separate them and cut the rocks and polish them before they can shine their radiance. Everybody has that radiance.
well, even diamonds are formed under extreme pressure,
That's right, exactly. Yeah.
you know? So, well, I have another question for you, but I want to talk about the path really quickly as we go down this road. So you have empathy and then you have compassion. And what do you say to people about growing in their compassion? You said that we are at very much so divided right now. And
Right.
I feel as though that compassion is really something that you say empathy, and that's probably as you're saying, the stair stepping, that we just demand that our way is the only way, and that there's just this right wrong duality that we're so forcing down people's throats right now versus seeing the fullness for everyone and having compassion towards each person's journey.
Right. I think the answer to that question is something I learned from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who's a good teacher. In fact, his central message is compassion. And I met him in 2004. Pope John was alive at that time. He hosted 30 of us. It's almost 21 years ago. And I've seen him since then. And he spent 2 days with us, 15 hours. And it's only 30 of us. So it was amazing. I took 9 pages of notes and I gave a lecture on the wisdom I garnered from him. But one of the things he teaches is our true nature is compassion. He says, when you look at a tiger, its true nature of a tiger is aggression. That's why tigers have claws and, and fangs. Us humans, we have pretty nails and nice looking teeth because our true nature is compassion.
Mm,
And when you are connected to your true nature, that's where peace lives, that's where love lives, that's where joy lives. It's again something you have to build, like your empathy muscle, you can build your compassion muscle. Is to look and connect with your true nature. So back to the same issue that you connect with your spirit.
mm-hmm.
When you go through this process, it makes sense, it feels good, it feels inspiring, because the spirit is always compassion. It always creates solutions that are in the highest good for you, the other person, and the universe. And when you start to learn and to live in compassion, with practice, that compassion muscle builds. Not going to change your external circumstances. You're going to spend more time in happiness, in joy, and in health, and in loving relationships. Who doesn't want loving relationships? So in the spot where we are, there isn't much compassion. I have a good friend who doesn't speak to his brother because politically they have different views. And democracy is about different views to find solutions that are in the highest good. And I think that hopefully, if we can lift these socio-emotion concepts to the mainstream, hopefully we can take this divided nation and come together as Americans, as our forefathers really designed the Constitution to do. This is not, a right or wrong issue. Democracy is on the table. It's very concerning. And But you know, the way and I write a monthly newsletter, it's on my website, and I wrote about this in my last newsletter of how do you transform um, conflict into unity. And and I think it's by first of all understanding that there is a divine order to the universe. Sometimes we call it karma, rule of rule of law, um, treat others the way you want to be treated. But the universe timeline may not be yours. So
That's
the other part is to get engaged. I mean, I couldn't sit back and see that this country is so divided. So I created my second nonprofit called Peace Through Forgiveness. And I studied the space for 3 years before I launched it, March of 2024, March 6th, which would have been Tariq's 50th birthday. And I met many organizations that are working on conflict resolution, on forgiveness, on peace building. Many of them are international. And there's a forgiveness project in London. There's one in Hawaii. There's one in Stanford. I've done already 6 events. And in my second event, I invited 15 of these organizations, thinking that if they would come in and be at this event and share with us how do we bring these concepts into mainstream. And all 15 showed up. I had no pushback.
wow. Yeah. The importance of that.
Yeah. So we have to come together as a joint voice. And we're doing another one on the 5th of May. And it is my hope and prayer that there are more of us that want this unity, that want to live in empathy, compassion, and forgiveness.
What do you say that to, one of the things that I feel is a very, very common mindset to navigate from is a victim mindset. You wronged me. You did this to me. You walked in here and you looked at me that way. And, it's like, I was just told this the other day. And it's like, how, how are we putting so much energy behind a look when it's met with an I love you and a kiss? Like there's all this supposition. And when do people take responsibility for the eyes through which they're seeing, for the wounding that they're not engaging, for their own hurt that they're not giving voice to in a healthy way? You could very easily have been a victim, and you could very easily have given the middle finger to the world, and you could have been in major retribution towards Tony, and you weren't. You went the other way. And not only did going the other way bless you, it blessed Tony, it blessed Plez. There is this amplification experience that's happened because you chose to step out of victim and step into possibility. And you talk about frequency, and the Dalai Lama, I interviewed him. And one of the things that I noticed when I was speaking to him, and I'm sure you saw this, is that literally his voice has a frequency range.
Right.
You can really tell when he's talking that he's like up here. And then it comes down to his norm is happiness. So he's here. He doesn't ever go here. But you can literally, you're almost in the crowd with him going like this.
Absolutely. He lights up the room.
He does.
When he
And
walks.
that's the gift of people that do light up the room, is that they are not in this, and they're not in this the world's wronging me and let me get stories to prove that. They're in this, the world is beautiful and let me focus on the evidence that validates that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about victimhood. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I had a very full life when Tariq was alive. We talked about that. Then I had no life. And the two things I realized is that I wanted that full life back.
Mm.
We all do. I have a full life. And this life is more important. It's about saving lives of kids. International finance was about money. This is far more meaningful, far more purposeful, far more fulfilling, because I believe I'm on my spiritual purpose. That was a gift that came out of my tragedy. The second piece is there's no quality of life being a victim. I didn't want to go through life on crutches. Many do, because they find some comfort in those crutches. I wanted the full life back. And unless you forgive, you remain a victim. There's no other way. This lady here, Edith Eger in La Jolla, where I live, who is a Holocaust survivor and forgave Hitler.
Yeah, wow.
To move forward.
Right.
So forgiveness stops you from living a life of victimhood, understanding that there's no quality of life being a victim.
That's really potent. There's no quality of life being a victim. That is so true. And I really hope our listeners can just, if you just sit there with that for a minute, we get our cumulative collective experience with life by what we put into it and the words and the experiences. And that's our takeaway. And that's our reflection points of, am I having a life well lived? Am I a contributing member of society? Am I blessing people with my presence? And all of that becomes a vaporous reality if you're standing in a victim consciousness. Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow. Yeah. So what's your wisdom for people that you lost your son at the hands of someone else and you were able to see very quickly, which is, I think, so beautiful about you, that there were victims at two ends of the gun? What about people that have a situation in their life where it was the abuse of a parent, or it was the loss of a mother? I have a friend who's going through this right now, and his wife passed on, and he's, left raising two daughters. And so there's a lot of being present to the pain and not turning that pain into anger that is becomes a victim consciousness for the person that's left behind. I lost my mom. I lost my dad. I'm a teenage girl that doesn't have a parent. There's a lot of opportunities to become a victim.
Yes, so good question. So one of my books, which is the basis of my workshop, I'm actually doing one in Hawaii on Sunday, is The Journey of Forgiveness, Destination Peace, is based on my book, The Secrets of the Bulletproof Spirit. And the subtitle is How to Bounce Back from Life's Hardest Hits. It's 30 chapters. It was published by Random House in 2009. So it's a process. You can't move from a tragedy like what I suffered into not being a victim and to forgiveness quickly. So there's 3 stages that I teach. Is the first one is you have to grieve. Grieving is medicine. There's a good adage from the Turkish tradition that he who conceals his grief does not find a remedy for it. There's healthy ways to grieve and unhealthy ways to grieve. The healthy ways to grieve is to spend time alone, to read something inspiring. To journal was a big deal for me. To meditate, to spend time with nature, to self-care, to spend time with, I spent time with my family and spiritual advisor, but then there were many others that had lost children that I didn't even know that they found me or I found them. The 40 days wasn't enough. I grieved for 3.5 years. I didn't have a relationship, which was the longest time in my adult life that I was not in a relationship, but I had nothing to give. Grieving is painful. There's a great, you probably know the book called The Prophet by Khalil Gibran.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's a chapter in there on joy um, and pain. I think is joy and the opposite of it, which would be pain or sorrow, joy and sorrow. Thank you. So, it's a fantastic book. I've read it over a couple hundred times. I can quote from it. And what Gibran is saying, that the faculty you feel joy with is the same faculty you feel sorrow with.
Mm.
So when you're feeling joy, sorrow is sleeping on your bed. When you're feeling sorrow, joy is sleeping on your bed. It's the flip side of the same coin. And he gives his example of a potter that is designing this brilliant masterpiece from clay. And as he shapes the masterpiece with his hand, he's so into it that he actually wets the clay with his tears.
Mm.
But when the sculpture is finished, he has to put the sculpture in a 2300-degree Fahrenheit oven for 28 hours so the clay can become porcelain and radiate its beauty. I know how it feels to be in the 2300-degree oven. So grieving in the right way can release that radiance. The second step we talked about a little bit is to give up all the resulting resentment. Now that you're grieved, this becomes a little bit easier. And you do that by building your empathy muscle. I do an exercise on empathy muscle, right? You do that by setting intention, which I do. I do a guided meditation. Actually, it's a free guided meditation on my website, Peace Through Forgiveness. Through is thru.org, and you can go in and look at the meditation. I did two guided meditation. One is on forgiveness, one is on life's mission. And you set that intention. Wayne Dyer wrote a book on intentions. You remember that? The Power of Intention.
That's for sure.
So when you are in a meditative state and you set the intention that you want to forgive, or whatever your intention is, you are planting a seed in very fertile soil. And as you come back to it, you're nurturing that seed. Because at the end of the day, forgiveness is a blessing. And what is a blessing? A blessing is when preparation meets grace. So you are preparing. And just like I was graced with the gift of forgiveness, so can everybody else. And the third step is, once you have given up all the resulting resentment, you reach out. You reach out with love and compassion. Often the issues, like you pointed out, are people you have loved once. I remember I did a workshop in London when a participant hadn't talked to her mother for 25 years. And I taught her, after give up all the resentment, take responsibility. Whatever your reasons are, your mother, you take the blame for not having that relationship. Write her a letter. And she did. And she read it in the workshop, and I thought it was all a dry eye. And she sent it, and now they talk every day. That's empathy, So you don't necessarily have to reach out to the person who murdered your child, although I did. But very often the angst is very much family oriented: father, son, mother, daughter, ex-wives, ex-husbands. Once you've gone through the grieving piece, once you've gone through the empathy and setting the intention and giving up the resentment, I found my biggest gift was reaching out to Tony. I can't really explain to you, but it was like a big release. Because when people say, well, how do I know I have forgiven this person? I said, you know what? When they were safe passage through your mind. When I think of Tony, my blood pressure doesn't go up. I've created a lot of love for him. My daughter calls him a soul brother. And he's very involved with the foundation now. So So that level of that level of compassion and empathy is difficult, but the gifts are huge.
I just love the gift that you continue to offer with how you language this and how you, all the stories that have come from this. One of the things that I, I, I think is really important to identify in this conversation is that when you do reach out to someone, you know, in your situation, Tony was whatever life had happened to him up to that point. He was in a position where he was ready to participate in the conversation you were offering. And he was impacted by it, and he made a pivot in his life. I know in situations where now adults have confronted their abuser, and the abuser is not in a position to receive the, you know, I forgive you, because they're not even willing to say, I did that. And this is part of what I feel is so important on the journey towards wholeness, is that it's not about what happens out there. It's not about the response. It's about your self, you're returning to self, and you're finding your path to here I am again.
Yes, so that's another good question, Brittany, and that is very true. Now, I forgave Tony a long time before he asked for my forgiveness. So here's my hypothesis, that if you forgive, and there cannot be any strings attached,
Yeah.
forgiving for you, you're not going to say, I'll forgive you if you ask for my forgiveness or you apologize. It's not about him, it's about you. But there's energy in forgiveness. We talked about the Dalai Lama. There's energy in his intonations, in his demeanor and his words. So Tony stayed in that bravado for 2.5 years. That everybody was stupid. His grandfather was too strict. The DA was stupid. The people that he stayed in juvenile prison for a couple of years before he was moved to an adult prison. And then finally, and the 2.5 years is what it took, whether they should be tried as a juvenile or as an adult. And that was the hearing. And he shifted a couple of days before because a public defender told Ples, Tony doesn't quite realize what's coming to him. You need to talk to him. And Ples, and he talked, and he was 16 years old. And Ples still stays his story. When I had a difficult conversation with Tony, I brought 2 fruit. So I brought an apple and an orange. And that was a practice from the time he lived with Ples. And in our conversation, Tony broke down. He jumped into my lap. He's 16 years old. And he says, Daddy, I'll do the right thing.
Mm.
And at his hearing, he gave this very remorseful, emotional speech where he said, I shot and killed Tariq Khamisa, a person I did not know, who wasn't doing anything wrong to me. I pray to God that Mr. Khamisa will forgive me for the pain that I have caused him. I'd already forgiven him, but that's the first time he asked for my forgiveness. And we use this speech in our programs, and you see a very different Tony. And the judge said to Tony, you don't have to take responsibility for the murder, for Tariq's murder. This is not a court case to try you for the murder. This is to decide whether you should be tried as a juvenile or as an adult. And in California, if you are charged with murder, you automatically get a retrial. Very expensive. And Tony's response was, I shot and killed Tariq Khamisa. I am guilty. I don't want to drag my family and Mr. Khamisa's family through a trial. When a judge asks an offender, how do you plead guilty or not guilty, what do they say?
Not guilty.
He didn't say that. And so she had to sentence him. Now, I wasn't in favor of him going to adult court, but it was not in my hand. It's the state of California against Tony. And the most lenient sentence she could have given him, which is what I asked, is 25 years to life with parole. The more severe would have been no parole. We just spoke together to 330 high school with the judge. I had a big article in Union Tribune. And the judge always says, he says, I've tried thousands of attempted murder cases, hundreds of real murder cases. And in every case, the victim's family is on one half of the court, the offender's family is on the other half of the court, and they leave hating each other. There's only one case that is different. And she basically interviewed Tony and me and my daughter, who was also at the parole hearing. Pin drop silence. And her daughter volunteered for the foundation. And she is a huge fan of the foundation.
That is the power that lives inside of each and every one of us.
Absolutely. And I think we just have to keep at it. Till there is enough of us.
Yeah.
Get to the tipping point.
Yeah. Now, as a dad, as a father, I'm going to ask you a question. And I know that you have a deeply elevated way of being. And so I come at this question with compassion for our listeners, but I would like to hear your response to this, to anyone who's listening, because we talk about turning our pain into our purpose, our pain into, our passion, the shoulders we can stand on. All that you've created, all the lives that you've impacted, all of the pivots that people made on their life trajectory as a result of you and what you have overcome happened as the result of losing your son.
Second.
Happened as the result of losing your son.
Correct.
So how do you explain to yourself the blessing of his loss?
Good question again, Brittany. We all have a spiritual purpose. It's complicated to know what that is. But you know what? We get nudges from the universe all the time. And the gift that I got from Tariq's tragedy was a download that I did when I left my body and went into loving arms of God. We started with the wisdom that there are victims at both ends of the gun. I now fully realize that that download did not come from my intellect or my loving heart. I don't think us mortals are capable of going there. It was a download from a higher power. So the first part of your question is to understand that there is a silver lining in every cloud. That sometimes you go through some pretty tough times because we humans are not very good at learning things. Sometimes we do the same thing over and over and over and over again, thinking we're going to get a different result. And yet, the universe is very loving and very compassionate and is very patient. And I think you have to tap into your higher power, which I do through meditation. So I meditate 3 different times a day. And that's on my website as a preamble. You can listen to it and then pick the guided meditation. They're about 30 minutes, whether you want to work on forgiveness or working on your life's mission. And that, to me, is where you have all the answers. All the answers you seek are within you, but not in your intellect and not in your emotion, but in your spirit. People ask me, what kind of your workshop? What kind of workshop? What kind of work do you do? I said, you know what? I just don't work at the cognitive and the emotional level. I work at the cellular level. I actually coined the word cellular because when you transform at the level of the spirit, they're never the same, and that transformation will sustain. So when you start to begin to understand, you don't ask why me. That's a victim mentality. You ask, why did I attract this to me? I asked this to the Dalai Lama. Because he said, everything that happens to you, you attract. And I said, Your Holiness, I'm having a hard time. Did I attract Tariq's murder? He said, according to our tradition, before you were born and Tariq was born, you had a contract because in every lifetime, you have lessons. And the contract was he would come to you, and at the young age of 20, he would die. God gave us free will. You still had to decide between revenge and forgiveness because your lesson in this lifetime was forgiveness. And you know what? You made the right choice. So in your next lifetime, you don't need to lose another son. It's an evolved view, I get. But there is a divine order to the universe. Each lifetime is a blink of the eye. We are all on this path to self-realize, to find enlightenment, nirvana, whatever word you want to choose. And we all have a mission. And when we die, we've completed our mission. Tariq's mission was completed at age 20. Mine isn't yet. That's why I'm still alive. But I do know that I have a spiritual purpose. Now, people ask me, well, what do you think is my spiritual purpose? I said, well, it's within you. What I can tell you, it is under the umbrella of service. There's a great quote from Rabindranath Tagore. You might know him. He's an Indian sage. He says, I dreamt life was joy. I woke up and I found out life was service. I acted, and behold, service is joy.
Yeah.
So to help other people. So that piece is something that we can all cultivate. A victim mentality is why me. A more evolved question is, why did I attract this to me? Understanding that everything that happens to you, to quote His Holiness, you attract. Why? For your own spiritual growth.
Right. So now you're made. Now I'm crying because that truth is the why behind why I'm doing this. And just, it is of service that I'm doing this. Just that if people could truly embody the fullness that is awaiting them in their life experience, just truly embody the rapture that is available to us when we choose to see life through a lens of curiosity and excavating what is the blessing behind this. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so much. You're such an incredible human being. And I love that you speak to meditation because, yes, we've got to go inward. We've got to sit with silence. We have to get comfortable with sitting with ourselves for the higher wisdom to be heard. It's always there. It's just create the space to allow the download to be heard.
Yes. So there's two pieces to it. The one is you have to prepare yourself. And the preparation is what I teach, what I write about, what I work, whatever work you have to do. And know and believe without a doubt that when your preparation is complete, right, grace will reward you with the gift of forgiveness, with the gift of finding your life's purpose, with the gift of the joy. And I think that the preparation part is living in those high vibrating emotions.
Yeah.
That's what the gifts are.
And that's a choice.
That's exactly a choice. Yeah.
Yeah. My amazing friend that I've known for, I can't believe it's been about 20 years. I love and cherish every time we get together. You grow me as a human and you give me, we hold the space together that is truly what communion is. So thank you.
You're so welcome, and it was great to see you again. And I always learn from our conversations. They're always very rich, and you ask very deep, insightful questions. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Azim. And you have a talk coming up. People can find more, discover more, your books and everything at your on your website. And that is, I have it written down here. What is it? Tell us your website.
So there's two websites, azimkhamisa.com, which is my name. There's peacethroughforgiveness.org, which through spelled THRU. And of course, the Tariq Khamisa Foundation is TKF.org. So those are three websites that will give you an idea of the work that I'm doing. And my email is very easy, azim@azimkhamisa.com. So, and I do better with email. If you have any comments, questions, or can't find anything, feel free to email me. I'm very happy to help your audience. Hopefully this will be helpful to them as well.
Thank you, friend. Thank you so much. Wrapping my arms around you. And when, like I said, when I'm out in California, we're going to have another spectacular dinner together.
I look forward to it, Brittany.
Me too, Azim. I'm sending you so much love. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye. Oh, I love the clarity of thought, the presence of being, the power experience that Azim brings into every conversation I have with him. And that to me is just a billboard reflection for how important it is to stand in commitment to our own lives, to step out of victimhood and into the driver's seat of co-creating with the divine, whatever that means to you, but that accessing the fullness of us comes from making conscious choices, choice by choice, to step into empathy, compassion, forgiveness. And in all of that, you discover more of you than you may have never even known was there or possible to experience. What a treasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this and for sharing this with anyone that you feel compelled to share with. And if you feel drawn to participate in our Happy Parent, Happy Child conversation or challenge that's going on after this, then please sign up for the VIP. And you'll get so many more resources inside of that, including all of these conversations to have, and tools and resources and support as you reclaim the potency that you are inside of the family container that is yours to have in a beautiful, robust, full way. Thank you so much for your participation. You matter. So grateful that you're here, and I'll see you in the next conversation.